I don't know about that. Well, what I would say is good afternoon and welcome everybody. Appreciate everybody coming to join us through this virtual Q&A session that we have this afternoon. And I'm super excited about the level of interest that's out there on the work that the Energy Transition Act Committee is doing, and level of interest as it relates to this request for information that's been put out. Just to kind of briefly go over what the agenda is going to look like this afternoon, we're going to first review the purpose of this session and give a little bit of background. Then we're going to allow for the executive officials that have joined us the ability to do some self-introduction and introductory statements. If we are joined by the other conveners, Mr. Taylor or Representative Taylor and Commissioner Toticini, we'll allow for them to do introductions and introductory statements and then go directly to questions and answers. To begin, would like to let everyone know that there's a small Q&A button down on the bottom of their Zoom window. And in order for a question to be asked, we ask that you type your question into that Q&A, and then our moderator, Ms. Johnston, will then read the question, and we'll try and get it answered as quickly and easily as possible. And just as a matter of information, we expect for the executive representatives to be with us for an hour. And so we're going to try and go through questions as quickly and efficiently as possible. But I will work to ensure that, that if there are lingering comments or questions that I will stick around and make myself available. And I know that the Cabinet Secretary and other representatives are also available outside of this forum. Finally, just to let everyone know, we are we are recording this session, and it is our plan to make it publicly available such that then other folks who are not able to participate are able to review the Q&A that has been asked. But if there are additional questions, again, we are available outside of this forum to make sure that there's as much information as possible being transmitted, okay? That's a very important thing for us. So first off, just a little introduction of myself. My name is Jason Sandel. I am a convener of the Energy Transition Act Committee, along with fellow conveners, Representative Taylor and Commissioner Toticini. And I am a convener representing the Department of Workforce Solutions. We've been brought together largely to assist the state and the Indian Affairs Department, the Economic Development Department, and the Department of Workforce Solutions as they work to build their plans to administer the proceeds raised in accordance with the Energy Transition Act, which of course was passed in 2017, landmark legislation for the state of New Mexico. And particularly Section 16 of that act requires plans to be developed as it relates to the expenditure of about approximately $20 million that's allocated to those three departments. In October of 2019, the committee was brought together to provide a broad overview of the requirements established by the ETA and to receive a briefing regarding the current state of decommissioning the San Juan Generation Station, and ultimately to receive updates related to economic development plans in the affected communities. The second meeting for the ETAC was planned to occur in Shiprock in March of 2020. And the stated goal for this second meeting was to solicit additional ideas from the affected communities so as to assist with the development of each of the building of the departmental plans as is required by the ETA. The strong message is we would like as much participation and as many ideas as possible, and for as many people as are interested to participate and to provide advice. And that's very, very important in the work that we're doing. As a result of the global pandemic, COVID-19, the March meeting was canceled, and considering the strain that COVID-19 has put upon the states and tribal nations' resources and people, the second meeting of the ETAC has been delayed. In an effort to restart the process of listening to affected communities and people, the conveners of the ETAC determined that it would be best to issue a request for information, seeking the information that is required to be gathered to be compliant with the development of each department's plans. So this question and answer session is really designed to provide broad-based information and guidance as it relates to that request for information, such that we can get as much feedback and generate as many ideas as is possible across the affected communities as it relates to the expenditure of this $20 million. So with that, I'll hand it over to each of the executive officials. I think first to Secretary of the Department of Workforce Solutions, Bill McCamley. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir. My name is Bill McCamley. I'm the Secretary of the Workforce Solutions Department, and we are one of the 3 state departments that is in charge of overseeing funding that will eventually come to help with the economic diversification efforts in Northwest New Mexico because of what's happening to the mine and the power plant there. In terms of the RFI, our goals are a couple-fold. Number one, we would really like to see proposals on how to use that funding that really contribute to a holistic strategy for diversifying the economy. And in our expertise and in our line of work, that means what are some of the training programs that would allow people to get the jobs that are hopefully going to be created through the efforts in this field, and what kind of career opportunities can people have, both people that are cycling out of not only the direct jobs that are kind of going away through this process, but also maybe some of the other folks that might want to pivot into a new line of work, hopefully leading to new opportunities for the area. So for us, in terms of plans for that people might want to submit, we really want to see concrete career pathways, concrete training partners, and we would also like to see how, in addition to the other departments on here, different funds can be utilized and leveraged with this money. And from our point, that would be the Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Act. If you're going to set up training programs, how can you use that money to help those folks? I'm sure for like economic development, they'd be interested in seeing the same thing for the JTIP funds. And I'm sure Ms. Padilla from Indian Affairs would like to see those there. The last thing I'll say is it's really important for us for plans to be holistic. To just go in and say, hey, we want to set up a plan that's only going to be about economic development, that's not really going to work, because not only do you need a workforce, but it's really important for this process that we include our Native American partners intricately as well. So that's kind of my thing. Mr. Sandel, I appreciate it, and I'll turn it back to you.
Terrific. Next, thank you very much for that, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate your time and your dedication to making sure that we get this right on behalf of the community. Next, we have Deputy Secretary Nadine Padilla with the State of New Mexico Indian Affairs Department. Nadine, would you like to introduce yourself and provide some introductory comments?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Also, I just wanted to see if you were watching the chat. It looks like a few people might be trying to join. I'm not sure. But good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name is Nadine Padilla. I'm the Deputy Secretary at the Indian Affairs Department. We are one of the departments that are helping to implement the Energy Transition Act. Like everyone else, I'm excited and glad to see that there's strong participation on today's call. As Jason said, we had to postpone our second community meeting, which we had wanted to host earlier this year, but I'm glad that we're picking up our efforts again to reach out to communities, make sure that there's good support, that we get good proposals for the 3 funds that are available. For IAD, we're really interested to hear what ideas and recommendations come from the community as far as how they would like to see those funds spent. And we just look forward to a good conversation today, and we're always available to answer any questions outside of this forum as well. So thank you, everyone.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary. We also have with us Mr. Mark Roper, who is a Division Director with the Economic Development Department. Mr. Roper, take it away.
Thank you, Jason, for that. And I am Mark Roper, Division Director for Economic Development for the New Mexico Economic Development Department. And I want to echo Secretary McCamley's comments about the holistic approach that we want to see in this RFI. As he astutely said, you know, if we just focus on the hard infrastructure monies available, a LEADA function of this money, we'll miss out on the opportunity to really talk about career paths, training, and truly make a difference in what's going to happen in the northwest corner of New Mexico. So while we each have our own individual areas of expertise and our own individual areas of funding and how we can utilize that funding, if we don't have an overall approach and a holistic approach from a ground up effort, which is why the people on this webinar that aren't here in front of the camera right now are the most important part. We need to hear from them. We need to know what's going to work in your community, in your area, so that we can build this plan properly from the ground up. I'm always available. My cell phone's well publicized, and I answer it at pretty much any time. So email and phone, we're always available and ready to help as we move through this process.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Mr. Roper. I know that Representative Taylor is on the webinar, and we are trying to get him over to the presentation. Oh, it does look like you are able, Representative, to jump in and provide an introduction of yourself and some introductory comments. Mr. Representative Taylor? Representative, we're not able to hear you. I see your name. Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to keep on working with Representative Taylor to make sure that he has an opportunity to provide some comments to the group. But in the interest of time and making sure that we're answering as many questions as possible, we'll go ahead and start the question and answering period. And Ms. Johnston, again, is going to be reading the questions from the Q&A box, and then we'll hand those off to each of the officials that are here joining us here today. So go ahead, Ms. Johnston, please.
So, Councilman, this is Bill McCamley. I'm not hearing from Stacy, so if it's okay, I've got the chat here. I will read the questions, and hopefully Stacy can get back on. The first question is, can you send your email out after the presentation? How do we want to handle that?
Mr. Secretary, I think that what we've tried to do is create a central repository of Energy Transition Act Committee information on your Department of Workforce Solutions website. And what we'll make sure to do is make sure that the conveners and each of the executive representatives have their email listed on that website for folks to be able to access.
And that website is dws.state.nm.us/ETA for Energy Transition Act. And you can actually see the minutes from the last meeting, and we'll get a copy of this recording up there as well. The next question.
Secretary McCamley.
Are you back on?
I'm back on. I'm sorry. It helps when I push unmute, so I apologize for that. The next question is, how does what each department is looking for varying? Who is the ultimate dictator on what projects will be funded? Sorry, decider.
I mean, I guess I'll start. This is Bill with the Workforce Solutions Department. We made a decision with all three departments that we were going to try to do this as together as possible, because we realized that good projects are going to include not only traditional economic development, marketing, and infrastructure development, but also workforce pathways and also a pretty intricate involvement with our Native American communities in the area. And so while each of the three of us come in with different kind of expertises and concerns, I think that we want to try to do it to get projects that are holistically built that combine aspects of each of those things. I can say from our aspect, we really want to make sure that there are concrete career pathways built into whatever proposal comes in. So if there is, for instance, a proposal to develop the film resources of the area, how are we then working on the training of film crews, of set designers, of costume people, all those folks moving forward? And then how does that build into the rest of the project? Deputy Secretary Padilla or Mark, I don't know if you want to add to that, but.
I can add to that, and that's exactly our approach too, is that we're wanting to see projects that encapsulate and encompass all of the areas, and then we'll use our money in the way that we can use it within the realms of statutes. So our money is dedicated to be used in land building and infrastructure, and those are the types of investments we'll be looking to make as part of this as to that portion of the project. We also have our training programs that we can partner with the Department of Workforce Solutions as they're working on career pathways, and we can work with businesses to help on the training side. And then obviously, as I can't say enough, it's got to come from within. It's got to come from the people here, that what's going to work for them, because we can't come in here and tell you what's going to work. You guys are going to have to tell us what's going to work in your area and your community, and then we can bring our resources to the project.
Good. Deputy Secretary Padilla, anything to add to that?
Just add briefly that we also, we like the collaborative approach, working with the other departments and funding projects that encompass all of our concerns, and building this holistically is important to us. Specifically for Indian Affairs, we're interested in hearing what our tribal communities want the funds to be for, and so just really hearing any and all suggestions from the community.
Terrific. I do see Representative Taylor and would like to have afford him the opportunity for introductory comments and to introduce himself. Representative?
Can you hear me now?
We've got you now, Representative.
Okay. Sorry, some days it just doesn't seem to work. Anyway, welcome to everybody who's on today. This is an interesting occasion to in our convening process. At the same time, I feel like working through this RFI process provides some opportunities that would have been more difficult in a group setting face-to-face. So I think maybe there's an advantage there. And I really do look forward to see what kind of ideas are coming through to really affect our area. I know that here in Four Corners, we are working on a number of projects, and many of them involve the Navajo Nation to our west. And so I look forward to maybe finding some opportunities that are mutually beneficial to both the east and west sides of San Juan County.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that, Representative, and appreciate you being here today. Ms. Johnston, is there another question?
Yes, Thank you. The next question is, the Energy Transition Act helps ease the transition from fossil fuels to renewables. How will you handle proposals from the fossil fuel industry?
And I think I'll just try and jump in on that one. The statute in, I believe, section 16 very clearly identifies some of the evaluation criteria on what each department's plan must take into account. And so what I would say is, as ideas are being evaluated for further discussion as they're submitted, the statute will provide the greatest guidance, and then of course guidance from the departments as it is their responsibility to build the plan and administer it. So that would be my response, and certainly looking to anybody else if they have anything to add to that. Okay, next, Ms. Johnston.
Great. Could you provide some details with the transition funds on infrastructure? Is this covered, and in what capacity?
I'll jump in there. So infrastructure from our standpoint has a fairly broad basis. It could be such things as roads, curbs, gutters. It could be such things as water, utility improvements, water lines, sewer lines, even such things as water and wastewater treatment would be considered infrastructure developments. We would also consider infrastructure to be base improvements to an existing facility, which would mean something that you would consider as tenant improvements or something like that would also be an infrastructure investment. So it's a fairly broad definition that we bring to the table as far as what infrastructure would mean.
And if I can just jump in there and add real quick, for any kind of training program, we would consider plans that had infrastructure for things like equipment needed for training, supplies for workers, things like that. I would also say that it would be really interesting to see if you have a plan and some kind of infrastructure developed as part of that. How do you include like LEDA monies? How would you include maybe efforts to get state legislators to put capital outlay in, those sorts of things to make sure that we're leveraging as many resources into projects that are going to work as possible. Mark, would that be okay?
Absolutely.
I might jump in here as well. I think it's important to recognize that, the lion's share of the money is directed toward job training. The fact of the matter is we have, I think, $6 million in the bill for economic development. And we really need to remember that the goal of this thing is to create new jobs in an attempt to replace some of those that were lost. And it costs a whole lot more to provide a place and the infrastructure for somebody to have a job than it does to train them for the job. And so I think with regard to infrastructure, it needs to be very focused on infrastructure that directly goes to providing an opportunity for a job.
Terrific. Anything else on that?
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Johnston.
Thank you. What are the project timelines ideally sought for proposals?
So I'll
Go ahead.
I'll jump in on that. And we have some obligations to have plans together that would be addressing the concerns that are raised in the statute by the time that the first source or the first round of funding is being provided to the departments. Our understanding at this time is that the first round of funding could be available as soon as next March. But there is in the Act some requirement for appropriation authority to be provided that needs to be reviewed. So I don't know that there's a strong thou shalt spend date, but what I would say is as the community is impacted, we would like to be investing in the community sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much. Next question is, we are interested to know how the results of this process are going to be utilized after they have been collected and the weight that they will have on the ongoing development of strategy for the ETA.
Certainly, I can jump in on that as well and just kind of begin the conversation, and it's a wonderful question. The idea behind the RFI is to generate as much or as many ideas to the conveners and ultimately the full Energy Transition Act Committee for evaluation. And so the idea is then to cull these proposals, and then for there to be a subsequent meeting, most likely in November, to then review publicly the proposals that have been brought forth. I think the other idea is if there are similar proposals between competing proposers, then identifying them to each other in a way that we can encourage cooperation. The idea is really for there to be a good, strong public process where as many people can be involved and as many ideas can be evaluated, and with lots of public feedback about how we're moving forward.
And Jason, can I add to that real quick?
Please.
Something that Mark said, and definitely something that Deputy Secretary Padilla touched on, is that these things only work if they come from the local community. These projects, no one's coming in trying to say you need to do X, Y, and Z. And so the real need for us is to see what projects are out there, how much support it's got, and what's realistic to start to give people, chances to diversify the economy. But it's got to be supported at the grassroots level in San Juan County, and I think that's really important for us to hear what kind of support people have from as many different resources as possible.
Great. So our next question is, what is the time frame that the monies will be spent?
This is Jason again. I think that we covered that just a little bit earlier. It's not a specific timeline. Much of it depends upon the proposal as well as the funding that comes through the funding mechanism that's been established according to the Energy Transition Act.
The next question is asking if this recording will be available offline, and if I may, this will be available on the Department of Workforce Solutions YouTube channel, and I'll make sure to include that in the chat. The next question is, given the unique legal and jurisdictional considerations, will there be a specific Native American work group to address funding proposals?
I can go ahead and answer that. Thank you for the question, Deputy Chief of Staff Bluehouse. At this point, we hadn't considered creating, I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull up the question so I can better read it.
Would you like me to read it again?
Okay, now I see it. Thank you though. So we weren't planning on creating a separate work group, but I think the idea is that all of these proposals and ideas will be presented to the Community Advisory Committee. And it's that group that will kind of vet and sort through the proposals. And as Jason said earlier, they'll be grouping together similar proposals and trying to build connections. I think that's where most of the work is going to happen. And I just wanted to highlight that on the Community Advisory Committee, the group that will be sorting through these proposals, there is representation from the Office of the President and Vice President. That's Ms. Michelle Henry. The Speaker's Office has submitted Council Delegate Wilson Stewart as their representative. We also have 2 community members, Joseph Hernandez and Dion Ben that serve on the Community Advisory Committee, as well as representation from the Hickory Apache Nation. So those people, I think, would be closest to a work group that will sort through proposals. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. The next question is, the RFI requires applications to request funding from different departments in the application. In the opening remarks, it was indicated that there is a desire for holistic proposals. The commission may be best suited to decide what contributions should come from which department. Can you comment on how the evaluation process will unfold?
So this is Jason. I'll jump in on that. It's a little bit of a difficult situation that we're in because the idea initially was to have a bit of an interactive conversation through the community meetings, which COVID has now, of course, prevented us from being able to do. Through this RFI process, then the idea is then for the Community Advisory Committee, as well as the conveners and the departments, to hear as many ideas as people want to share with us, and then for us to build a process on how to vet those ideas in a very public way moving forward. So that's very much what we're in the middle of right now. And the process is going to unfold with the public involved.
Thank you. The next question is, I thought I read that no fossil fuel projects for Economic Development Department funds. Is this the same for Workforce Solutions Department transition funds, example, job training, apprenticeships, etc., only for non-fossil fuel programs and projects?
So I'll step in on that. The way that we've been interpreting that portion of the law is that, yeah, there is an issue with fossil fuels. I'll just give you an example. The one we have considered was for possible development of the petrochemical resources in the region. Since that wouldn't be burning any of the natural gas coming out, that is something that we might consider. So obviously it's going to depend on the different project proposals that come in, but that's at least from where we were initially taking a view of that part of the law. And I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that, but I understand where you're coming from that, but that's kind of the way we've been interpreting that. So as long as you're not contributing to carbon emissions in a long way, we want to make sure that we remain open to any of those proposals.
Okay, hearing no one else jump in, I will move on to the next question. Will any RFIs be accepted after October 31st?
Our goal, this is Jason, our goal is to have the RFIs submitted by October 31st. We as a group have discussed if there were some sort of circumstance that would prevent an RFI to be submitted by that time, we would take that into consideration. One of the, or several of the items that we are particularly interested in or aware of and cognizant of is the impact of COVID and the ability to be able to submit these ideas, and any sort of restrictions as it relates to language or technology. So those three things are cause for us to consider an RFI subsequent to October 31st. I would add though that we will begin our evaluation process quickly, and that timely submissions are going to be receiving, I would say, our attention sooner.
And I might jump in on that as well. I think that it's important that that we have a deadline because we have a deadline. And but on the other hand, if ideas are developed post that time, I think passing that information on to that RFI onto Four Corners Economic Development would be the way to move with that, because some great projects all of a sudden turn up that are past this deadline, there's no reason that they can't take a different track. So don't let it ruin the day. Make sure that any great ideas do come along after our deadline to Four Corners Economic Development.
And to jump onto that question a little bit, if October 31st is the RFI deadline, when will you be asking for final proposal from Navajo communities?
It's the same, they share the same deadline of October 31st.
Perfect, thank you. What types of data will the group need from our communities to assist in the 3 agency determinations for funding projects?
Sure, I'll start with that. So for instance, from a workforce solutions perspective, if someone comes with a proposal, we would like to see hard plans, schedules, needs for different personnel, needs for infrastructure, for how any kind of plan would involve the training of folks to be able to get jobs that would create it through the project. So as an example, another one of the things that was brought up at the first community we had was developing outdoor recreation in the Farmington and San Juan County regions, right? So if someone came in to say, hey, we want to develop these trails, we want to develop new types of fishing, tour guides, that sort of thing. I'm sure economic development would like to see how you're going to market that. How are you going to build infrastructure for that? I'm sure Deputy Secretary Padilla and Indian Affairs would be like, how do we involve the Native communities and tribes in making sure that folks get some of those resources and folks get employed. From us, it would be what kind of training is going to be needed. Do you have to set up a process by which someone can get a certification in outdoor recreation, maybe CPR classes for people that are trail guides, maybe fishing certifications for people doing those sorts of things. So what kind of specific things are going to be needed to develop those jobs? I'm just saying, one of the examples that we brought up, but if someone's going to say, hey, look, our goal is to do X, what we would be interested in seeing from the planning process is how will you get people skilled up to take the jobs that would hopefully be created through that process. I hope that makes sense. And I'd really want to open it up to the other department representatives to kind of build off that if you guys would like to.
But I think you stated it really well that we're going to look at all proposals, and then we'll focus in on what is our expertise and how we fit into the project. So I think you gave a really good example there. And we would focus on, okay, that's a great idea. How are you going to develop the infrastructure? What's the cost associated with developing that infrastructure? And what's the timeline? That would be our focus. Your focus would be on training. And then Nadine's focus would be on how do we involve the Native community, and are those opportunities going to be available or possible on tribal land? I think that's what we mean by a holistic global approach. Let's include everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next question is, to ensure the Navajo communities have opportunity to access the funds, will technical assistance be available?
So this
I'll jump in. I'll jump in there real quick. I mean, and I know I can speak for all of us in state government, whether it be the 3 departments here or the rest. We have people out there specifically to provide technical assistance on all of our programs. So yes, technical assistance is available. We'll make sure that they get pointed in the right direction to find the people that can help them in the particular area that they need assistance.
Thank you. The next question is, based on what you're stating, is it best to have collaborative plans formed by area partners as opposed to numerous RFIs?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Not only collaborative, but I would stress comprehensive. The idea is that each of these departments are allocated a specific amount of money, and in order for the money to be leveraged and put to the best use, the idea is for projects to touch each of the departmental requirements and the plans in which they have to build.
Okay, great. Next question is, there are many impacted communities working in many areas of COVID relief, Tribal CARES Act funding, elections, etc. Couldn't the RFI process be given a longer window for everyone to fully give some time to develop sound projects?
Jason, it's okay. I'll jump in on that. You know, we had a timeline put together that we had all kind of agreed on before the pandemic hit, which was that we would have our first community meeting last fall. That went really well. We would have another community meeting in the spring of this last year. And then we would hopefully have had our last community meeting, I believe in September last month, so that we could start the process of really finalizing plans. So when the money does become available, I believe it's next year, we can start working forward. Obviously, the pandemic has put a huge hit on that, and everybody is seeing that right now. But I do think it was important we started moving forward, trying to really get some hard, concrete ideas. As Representative Taylor said, I mean, the deadline shouldn't stop you from coming to us with ideas after, but I do think we want to really get another community meeting planned and use the ideas that we would get in any process as a basis for having some discussions there. And so it was important for us to have a deadline so we could get people to start coming to us with ideas. Jason, I don't know if you want to add to that, but I know from us, you know, we need to start having a little bit of rubber hitting road, and just putting a deadline, as Representative Taylor pointed out, is important to see what's out there and see what people are thinking so we can move forward on some stuff. Is that okay?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, I think that you've said it really well. So thank you for that.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is there a screening matrix that can be shared in terms of the vetting process?
At this time, there is no screening matrix. We're simply looking for ideas. And as those ideas continue to get fleshed out at the next meeting of the complete Community Advisory Committee, we might discuss a screening process or matrix at that time. But right now, we're just really trying to generate as many ideas as possible.
If I could, I just want to echo what I've been saying from the very beginning. We're not here to tell you what to do. We're not here to put you in a box and say, fit this criteria. We're here to listen to you. What's going to work in this area that's being affected by the energy transition? Tell us, and then we can take our expertise and apply our resources to help you achieve those goals. So again, bring us ideas. The more collaborative, the better. But most importantly, just bring us your ideas.
And just to add to that, and we've said this before, when you look at similar efforts around the country, one of probably the most accurate things to look at is the base realignment and closure things that happened to military bases across the country in the 90s and in the first part of the century. And what the military found was that when communities took over those bases that got closed, the most successful projects were the ones where everyone in the community came together and said, we're going to do this. And we're going to build this factory. We're going to do this tourist destination. We're going to do whatever we come up with, but we're all going to do it together. And the cities and the counties and the school districts and all the communities said, we're all in this together. And I think that's really what we're looking for, is to say, okay, if there's a project that looks like it's got real legs, can the city, the county, tribal governments, community organizations, the schools all come together and say, we're all going to make this work because we think this has the best opportunity for growing our community in the future. And that's really where, if the community can come and put some energy on that, we can come in on the backside with resources and expertise to help it work. But nothing's going to work unless it comes from that grassroots. So I think Mark's absolutely correct there.
Thank you. I think this next question kind of follows that right along. Is there a task force to help with writing the technical aspects of the RFI process and next steps in the proposal? If so, where will those resources be available?
So there is no task force to assist with the writing of the technical aspects of the RFI. And as Mr. Roper just said, I would put forth that rather than worrying about the detailed technical aspects, just getting us ideas is really what we're after.
Thank you. Is there a limitation for eligible projects by region? And is there a limit on which Navajo chapters can apply?
I would defer to Deputy Secretary Padilla, but I would say no and no.
Yeah, I agree. Well, actually, I was going to also mention just the definition of affected communities, which is laid out in the bill itself in the ETA legislation. And the ETA defines affected communities as those communities within a 100-mile radius of the closing plant or station.
Great. Next question is, how would a person participate in a committee, say the advisory committee, as a representative of the mine or the power plant?
So representation on the Community Advisory Committee was governed by the Energy Transition Act in and of itself. And there are representatives on that Community Advisory Committee that represent the affected workforce.
I might also add that it doesn't have to be a group that proposes these things. It could be an individual. We're looking from ideas from one end of the spectrum to the other. So it's not necessarily an organization or a company. It can be an individual.
Next question is, how is the ETA committee, the 3 state agencies, reaching out to impacted tribal communities? I have come across many regions on the tribal reservation that haven't been updated.
Thank you for that question. I can go ahead and take the lead on that. I think that's a really important question, and that's something that the Indian Affairs Department has taken really seriously to make sure that communities are informed on the process and how they can not only be involved, but help lead the implementation of the Energy Transition Act. Prior to the pandemic, IAD had a very robust outreach program, and we had a field organizer that was going out doing presentations at all of the chapters, providing information. Things are different now given the pandemic, but we are looking to build up our outreach programs some more. We are doing outreach, but we can always do more. We can always do better. So that's what we're striving for. And right now we're really relying on our grassroots organizations and partners to help us get information out there. We have been in communication with tribal leadership, informing them of the process and next steps moving forward. And also tribal consultation is required in the ETA, so we will be going through a formal consultation process as well.
Deputy Secretary, I would add, and if I'm misspeaking, please let me know, but if there are ideas on how we could do better from this point forward, we're certainly open to those ideas, because our desire is to get as many people and as many ideas involved as possible.
Thank you. Next question would be, would internship and apprenticeship programs which leverage career and technical education in both K through 12 and post-secondaries be considered valuable information for this particular RFI?
I'll take that one. Absolutely. And the more that they can be combined with employers who are willing to get people into the workforce and do those skills trainings while people are making money, the better they are. So yes, yes, and yes.
Will you accept RFIs by mail? And if so, does it have to be postmarked by October 31st?
Similar type of answer. We will take RFIs written on a cocktail napkin, and definitely mailed in any and every way. Our interest is to generate ideas, and so as we've said earlier, don't let the October 31st date be a hard stop for an idea coming into us. I think that Representative Taylor had the best idea. If it's later than October 31st, transmitting that to the Four Corners Economic Development Group would be the best catalyst for getting the information to us. But most definitely, please get us your ideas.
Verifying that all projects eligible for funding must be located in San Juan County. Will projects located within the Central Consolidated School District receive a higher rate?
My initial feedback to that is that that's going to be a decision and a conversation for the whole Community Advisory Committee once we're reconstituted and reviewing these plans. And I think that any sort of advice that was provided to the departments around focusing on Central Consolidated would be under advisement, but most definitely is something that we should be talking about as a larger committee and larger group.
Can you define holistic, as several of you mentioned at the beginning of this webinar?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that if that's all right, Jason. For us, how are you bringing all the aspects of making a project work into a proposal? So, and I'll just give you an example from my past. I used to work in economic development, and I worked for a small nonprofit that did rural economic development work in tiny towns across the state. And one of the first meetings I went to, there was an economic development meeting, and I didn't know where I was going. So I ended up sitting in this room on the other end of this community college where by chance there happened to be a workforce development meeting. And I'm sitting in there thinking, I don't know if I'm in the right spot. And eventually I asked someone, they said, no, you guys are on the other end of the building. And the problem with that is that if you don't do things together, they generally not work. So if, for instance, one part of the community submits a proposal to do, outfit the Raytheon plant up on the reservation and try to expand that. And all they want is infrastructure money for it, right? But there's no workforce part of that, then how are they going to get the workers to then go get those jobs? On the flip side, if the community college comes in and says, hey, look, we're going to, put a proposal in to train film workers, but there's no effort on the backside to bring in the productions that they would then work at, well, they're just going to leave the community and go work somewhere else, right? That's what we mean by bringing things together to make sure that projects really compose all the things necessary to develop the economy, to do some diversification, but to make sure that there are jobs available and that the community can develop long-term.
Great. Thank you, Secretary McCamley. Next question is, the RFI uses the word proposals. How specific should these proposals be in terms of budget? And can awards be made on that, or are proposals merely a starting point for further discussions?
I really appreciate that question and was probably misworded in the RFI. The intent is to seek information rather than detailed proposals that are going to be used for awards. It truly is seeking information to then be brought to the next meeting of the Community Advisory Committee.
I'll chime in a creative process while you're what we're involved in now. Limiting yourself because of budget constraints oftentimes will kill a lot of great ideas that you think are just too expensive. So everything is on the plate. Doesn't matter how uh, expensive or difficult a project may be, it's important to have it on the plate because you never know. There might be a way.
I just real quick, I want to kind of echo what Mr. Taylor just said there is that we are really focused on the ideas at this point. Budget shouldn't be a consideration at this point, but back to what Secretary McCamley said, the proposals or the ideas or the request for information, whatever term you want to use that kind of touch all these areas that we're talking about. Developing career paths for the workforce, developing opportunities on the tribal areas and within the tribal community, and developing infrastructure for the improvement in jobs. If we can encapsulate all of those in this quote holistic approach, and right now not worry about how much that's going to cost, I think will be very beneficial.
All right, Ms. Johnston, I know that some of our executive representatives have a hard stop here at 2 o'clock. We might be able to get another minute or two out of them. So let's ask one more question and then ask if they have any thoughts to wrap up before they have to leave.
Thank you. Last question is, follow-up to the communities are eligible within a 100-mile radius of the San Juan plant. Does this mean that Arizona and Colorado communities can apply?
So I'll answer that. And the answer is no, that has to be in New Mexico. And in addition, the law states that a community has to show that they have at least 40 effective workers by the closure of the plant and the mine.
Very good. Thank you for that. So Secretary McCamley, I know that you need to run. Are there any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the participants before you have to leave?
Just want to appreciate everybody's involvement in all this. I think there's a lot of great energy about where this is going, and we look forward to as great many creative ideas as you want to send to us. And I just want to reemphasize one more time how important it is to get as many groups in the local area backing a proposal as possible to show that there's real support for it. And I think those are going to be the most successful. So thank you all very, very much for your time. I got to run. I got a 2 o'clock I have to do as well. Really appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Deputy Secretary Padilla, before you have to run, do you have final thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, I just added my phone number and my email to the chat box. So if you have questions or want to chat through any ideas, I'm available to have those conversations with you. And just thank you to the conveners for organizing this. I think it was very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. And Director Roper, any final thoughts?
Just first, I want to echo what Deputy Secretary Padilla just said. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, all the conveners, for the effort that you've put in on this from the very beginning. It's a boots on the ground operation that we're here on, and I'm very pleased to say that the two that are looking at me on camera right now have been critical to that effort. So thank you very much. And to everybody else, thank you for your time. I know at one point I looked on here, we had over 60 people on the call. Thank you for your time. We look forward to each and every one of your ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea, as they say. So we look forward to getting your input, and looking forward to producing a plan that will be beneficial for all of us. So thank you again for your time, and thank you too for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Director.
Thank you.
Stacy, I don't know what your availability is to be able to stay on for just a little bit more and see if we can't get a couple more questions answered and
Absolutely.
keep this going.
Sure, absolutely. Be happy to.
And Representative Taylor, I don't know what your schedule looks like, but I would like to try and create as much conversation and answer as many questions as possible.
Well, I'm in quarantine, so you got me. I'm good for the next 24 hours.
I don't know that we could do this for the next 24 hours, Representative, but we could certainly give it our best. Stacy, why don't we go through a couple of more questions, see if we can give some more information, and if there's something that we need to defer to the executive department, we can certainly do as much.
Okay, perfect. An idea would be an RFI prep workshop for tribal communities. Would this be possible?
Yeah, this is Jason. I think that that's a terrific idea, and we'll make sure to pass it on to the appropriate folks. And I know that Director Roper was talking about technical assistance being available, and Deputy Secretary Padilla might be able to assist us with putting something together as it relates to that. But it's a wonderful idea, and I've taken note of it, so thank you.
Can renewable companies request funds to add registered apprenticeships to their development projects beyond those required by the ETA?
But I'm in the same place, and I feel like, where I think that we've said it several times, and just really encourage everybody, if they've got a good idea for the Energy Transition Act Committee and the Advisory Council to consider, I would say suggest those plans for our review.
Is this opportunity specific to San Juan County only, or can it include other coal-impacted communities?
The answer to that is guided by the language that's in the Energy Transition Act, and the Energy Transition Act does specify that it's New Mexico, within New Mexico's boundaries, and as Secretary McCamley said, with over 40 affected employees and 100 miles from the particular facility. I believe that those are the requirements that are established according to the law.
And I believe you've answered this once before, but just to clarify, can a community submit a project for each funding category?
Most certainly. If there were 3 different projects, one that fell into each bucket, then a community could submit 3 proposals. If there was one proposal that fit all 3 buckets, they could submit 1 proposal. If they had 3 proposals that fit all 3 buckets, they can submit that as well. Our goal is to generate as many ideas as possible, because this is critical path for the future of our community.
What information do conveners have regarding partner funding entities and/or resources for proposals? This can be helpful for how proposals are drafted, keying in on available resources.
We do not have any information regarding additional funding sources, and that's one of the items that we'll be looking at, these information submissions for the possibility of obtaining additional funding sources and leveraging the funds that we have available. Representative Taylor, I don't know if you have more on that particular topic.
Yeah, I'd just like to chime in on that. Again, funding is not what we're worried about here. We're really after the projects. If we have a worthy project, we're going to figure out how to fund it. And there's a whole range of things. I mean, there's existing state programs for funding economic development. There's capital dollars in the legislature. There's a number of different methods that those might be funded. So I would suggest that when you're thinking about projects, you don't even consider the money piece of it. We're really looking for the idea. And the only consideration out of this is it something that would really work in this area? And but don't worry about the funding. Worry about the project.
All right, perfect. If a closing mine or power plant wanted to add funds to the pot of 20 million, how would that happen?
So the Energy Transition Act establishes, in accordance with Section 16, different funds that are maintained by the state treasury. And I would imagine, not being the state treasurer or responsible for the direction of those particular funds, but I would imagine that there would be the ability to deposit funds into those identified funds that are maintained at the treasury. Representative Taylor, you have a wealth of experience and knowledge beyond me as it relates to that. Do you have anything more on that?
Yeah, I can't see that there's any problem with somebody contributing funds to the state for this project.
Incidentally, there will be 3 different funds, each one administered by the departments that are involved. So there is a fund that is administered by the Indian Affairs Department, one that's administered by the Economic Development Department, and the final by the Department of Workforce Solutions.
Next question is, why would the ETA fund a petrochemical plant?
I don't know that there is necessarily an answer at this point on what we would do or not do.
Next question is, how will the pandemic's economic turn down on the state impact ETA and future projects?
Wow, that really is a great question. And I can speak somewhat taking off the convener hat and just answering that the impact to the state based upon COVID has been enormous and remains enormous. And its impacts to the ETA are also significant in that there are very specific goals that are established according to the ETA on energy production, and as there are varying needs for energy consumption across the United States, that impacts our accomplishment of those goals that are established according to Energy Transition Act. But frankly, as great of a question as that is, that's one that is a little bit outside of the scope of what we're doing here, but still very much appreciated.
Looks like this may be our last question. Can the job training programs be out of state?
I heard Secretary McCamley, as well as the legislature, somewhat strongly identify that our goal is for this to be administered in the state of New Mexico for New Mexicans. But we can make sure to check with the secretary about any additional thoughts around that.
You know, I can add to that. I think that San Juan College has been very active in developing training programs for all sorts of companies looking to locate in this area. And I mean, it's sort of their forte. So I wouldn't see that would ever really be an issue, that we would have to go somewhere else for training. I'm sure we could create it here, even by bringing in experts from outside, but nevertheless, getting the job done locally.
That concludes our questions in the Q&A. Oh, looks like we might have just got more. Is the next ETA Advisory Committee meeting in November, and will the agenda be sent?
Certainly. So appreciate that question as well. And I think it's a great way for us to wrap this session up. Our intent is to receive the RFI submissions by October 31st. Again, not as a hard date, but as a date that we've put out there with the expectation that we get information in. That information will then be reviewed and and aggregated such that then we could provide it to the Community Advisory Committee no later than mid-November. And our goal is to have a full Energy Transition Act Advisory Committee meeting in either the end of November or beginning of December, depending upon committee members' schedules, so that we can review each of those proposals. So with that, Representative, it looks like we've gone through the questions. Appreciate the amount of attendance. And I would just like to say my personal appreciation to President Pendergrass of San Juan College, who really brought the idea of having this question and answer session and making it available for broad participation. And I just thought that that was an outstanding idea, and very much appreciate her leadership and guidance as it relates to that. So we're really at the end of this session. Do you have any final comments that you would like to bring forward? Representative?
No, I'm good at this point. I think it's been very productive.
Indeed. Ms. Johnston, thank you very much for moderating this session. And we might be tapping into your knowledge and expertise moving forward, but sure do appreciate you. And I appreciate also all of the people that have participated. As was identified by Mr. Roper, at one point we had 65 attendees. We still have 35 involved, and appreciate everybody and your interest and your desire to provide information in this RFI process. So thank you all very much and have a wonderful day. We appreciate you.